Uh,
Ta-da!
feel free to weigh in. Where are you coming in from? Where are you based? What time is it there? What are you
Oh
drinking?
gosh. What time is it for what time is it for you in Pittsburgh? Is that 10 o'clock over there?
11.
11. Oh, so
Yeah,
you're 2 hours apart from me. That's right.
yeah, yeah.
Nice. Not bad. Not bad. All
But I
right. So we got
Burlington,
Burlington,
Vermont. All right.
Canada.
Montreal. Both Burlington and Montreal are beautiful places.
Man, drinking coffee near Indianapolis. Now that's awesome. I'm drinking coffee too. I got to do that.
Cup,
That's
cup
just
of
one
tea.
of those things. Yeah.
Melanie, way
A
to
cup of tea.
play into the stereotype based in the UK. Very good. We got Germany. Nice. Coffee in Toronto. Ooh, Bulgaria. Oh, Bergen. What a beautiful place.
Have you been there? I've never been.
I have. I had a I inadvertently my Bergen story is so I had I did a workshop many years ago in Bergen, and then I had another workshop in Oslo afterwards. And
Oh,
when
nice.
I'm traveling, especially in Europe, because they actually have public
Transportation.
transportation and non-flight, non-car ways of getting around, I like to take the train. And so I just was getting from Bergen to Oslo, and I had no idea that I was getting on like one of the top 10 train rides in the entire world. And it's this like very famous train ride. So
Whoa.
it is
Uh,
like absolutely beautiful.
What
Absolutely.
what makes it a top 10 train ride?
You
Like
are going through fjords and mountains, and I had my laptop out with the intention of working, and after 5, 10 minutes, I closed it, and I was just like this out the entire window.
you're just gawking at the whole
Yeah,
thing, just like nose pressed up against the glass and
yeah.
everything.
So
Nice.
Norway, they strapped the camera on the front of the train, and they called it, and they just broadcast it, and it's called slow TV, and they did it a few different times, and it was just like this huge, like you could just follow along on the 7 hour train ride journey. It was massively popular.
It just shows how awesome the web is, right?
Yeah.
Something like that can
Plano
totally
could
exist.
could yeah, probably explain it better. So
Ah, well, cool.
amazing.
Let's jump into into some topics here. We've got a lot of like great questions that people have submitted before,
Yeah.
but maybe
Yeah,
even
maybe
before that,
yeah.
we can reframe what we're even doing because we're only on the second episode, right?
Yeah.
So what the heck is this? Hey, Brad, what is this? By the way, open up. Can you can you explain that to me, please?
We are figuring it out, folks. But no, so yeah, Jeff and I are we are figuring this out. But yeah, open up is we felt it that there was a really unmet need that a lot of times when we talk about our industry, we're often talking about tools and techniques and frameworks and all of that stuff. And really, in our experience, I think that what really is underneath all of that is the human experience. There's the frustration, there's, pain, there's heartache, there's burnout, there's mental health stuff going on, there's interpersonal conflict, there's
And
what that
excitement.
yeah, well, and excitement, sure, and that's what
Yeah.
we're trying to cultivate. But like I think a lot of it is how to navigate this world, this industry at a human level, right? And how do we, facilitate, fulfillment and finding purpose and finding that enthusiasm and excitement, and how do you tackle really hard problems like, dealing with layoffs and job search, but, burnout or other things that we all wrestle with, and like what should I be focusing on, like the anxiety of is AI going to take my job, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that that's what this is about. So what, the format is, we basically are like let us have it. This is an advice show, and we encourage people to write in and share their situation with us. And what we are going to do is we're going to uh, hopefully give some words of wisdom and some advice. And just so it's said, we are not licensed therapists or
Nope.
legal people or anything like that. So
Accountants. Yeah.
take everything we're saying with a grain of salt. But I do hope that we're able to provide some guidance and hopefully some, strike a nerve with what a lot of us wrestle with as we, navigate this industry, but also just navigate our lives.
Yeah. And the two of us, I mean, we've been in this industry for, gosh, what, collectively like 40 some odd years, and we've seen a lot. And that comes from experiences in working in startups and nonprofits and Fortune 500 companies and going out alone and just being freelance. We've seen everything and have been put through the ringer, and that I don't think that makes us feel like we're any more qualified to say anything. It just makes us more resilient to saying like, throw something at us.
Yeah.
And we've probably gone through it, or because in as Brad and I have like talked to over and over, we're like, oh my gosh, we've had so many similar overlapping experiences, but then at the same time we're like, I bet a lot of other people are having these experiences too, and who's actually talking about these things. So that's all we're trying to do. We're just surfacing those themes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. Let's dig into some of the questions. Like people's questions have been so great and just want to thank everybody who has submitted and shared their situation. It is extremely uh, you know, brave to do that. You're talking about some really deep stuff and, admitting to, you know, your your hard stuff and sharing that with us. So we thank
yeah.
you for doing that, and hopefully this experience can help you
That's
out.
right.
So
Being vulnerable is a really challenging thing,
yeah.
and you'll see that some of these are incredibly vulnerable. But to start off, we have this really great one where we see questions come up like this somewhat often, and it's a good starting place because it's not too heavy or anything. But hey, if you were a student just starting to study web design, what would you focus on? I teach front end web development or web design, so HTML, CSS, the Bootstrap framework, and I'm wondering what will be useful for my students in their future careers. And the question of horror on everyone's mind, well, here we go. Will web designers be replaced by AI? So we've got, a tiered question here with a few different areas. So, to break that down, the very first part is what would you focus on when it comes to web design from a student perspective? Um, Brad, like I'm sure you've got tons of resources and things that like are like starting points for people. Whenever I seem to talk with you, you have like 5 links that you want to share like right away. So
Yeah.
I'm already imagining you've got 10 links in your mind that you're already thinking of.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, yes and no. I think that like this moment in the latter part of the question of, is AI going to take our jobs or are we going to be replaced and stuff, which, the short answer is no, but I do think that it's a good framing for, well, what should we focus on, right? And we've been talking about this a lot, myself and my brother, as we've been sort of uh, turning into education ourselves, is like, oh, what are we doing here? And I think that that's really kind of what we're getting at, is like, what are we doing here? And we have this new crop of tools that makes the how a lot easier. The actual like implementation of this stuff is a lot more accelerated. But at the end of the day, having the discernment of going, is this good? Is what I'm looking at good? Whether I wrote it, whether I'm reviewing, a colleague's code or design or whatever, or did AI generate this thing? Is it good? Right? Like
Absolutely.
that's I think the really interesting question, and that helps frame what we ought to be learning and what we need to be focusing on. Things like Bootstrap, which they mention in the question, uh, that's fine. I think it's an application, it's a specific technology. I think it's important to understand that these things tend to ebb and flow. Jeff, I'm sure that you've touched your fair share of specific frameworks and technologies, and those things
Let some
tend to
go.
move. Yeah. Yeah. So, but I think bringing it back though, it's like focusing on fundamentals, understanding what the medium is, understanding the materials of the medium for which you're designing and building is, I think, really important. And what that focus on just like a really deep understanding of like what this is, what these languages are, what they do, help get you to a place where you are able to look at your own code or design or someone else's code or design or AI's code and design and be able to say like this this is good or this could be tweaked or this could be improved.
I like what you're saying there in terms of what we need to focus on, going back to the fundamentals of things, because that's exactly where my mind was going to. It's like, how can we even embrace or harness this power or technology if we don't understand what the core tenets of the technology are in the first place?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about like if I was a new student just starting to study web design, I'd be focusing on some of the stuff that sounds really boring at first. Like I'd be like, when it comes to CSS, I'd be thinking about writing modes. I'd be thinking about, document flow and direction. Like what's the block direction? What's the inline direction? What's the difference between a div and a span? How do these things behave? I want to get nerdy into semantics, because then when you prompt an engine like that, you can keep it honest, because they don't like to always be honest, from what I can tell. So yeah, going back to those basics, and as an educator myself, that's exactly what I do with my students. I take them directly through writing modes first and foremost, because I think if you start with direction on the web and how things flow in general, then layout becomes a lot easier to
Oh, that's
understand.
fascinating. That's really cool. I like that. That's really interesting. But yeah, like I think you're on to something there where there are these really unique qualities, especially for the web. But the same holds true, whenever we talk to designers who are designing and building iOS and Android apps and stuff like that. And even my wife in a former career was doing that kind of work. And it's really important to just understand the the affordances, the nature of these mediums and familiarize yourself with them. And like here's the opportunities, here's the limitations, here's the grain of them, here's what they're really good at, here's what they suck at. And that's something that we tend to see a lot with like the divide between design and development is that designers are over here just being like we and I think that there's really like something to really leaning into Frank Camaro, I think was the first person to say that, but the grain of the web or the grain of the medium,
Yeah.
which is, you know, it's universal, right? So writing modes and things like that, like Jeff, like what you're saying is that
Yep.
means that we can, internationalize, localize our experiences. That's amazing. But its universality also translates to accessibility. And so understanding what an accessible experience is really helps you understand yeah, as these things are just like splatting out a web page, you're able to discern whether or not that thing is accessible by understanding the heuristics and the things that go into making an experience accessible. Can I tab through this? Am I like losing the focus here? And again, whether that's you writing it, a colleague
Yeah.
writing it, or AI writing it, you're just able to you know what to look for. So there's this basement level foundational
Yeah.
stuff that as these tools, especially the AI tools, are becoming more, integrated and available, and people are leaning on them a lot more, is really important to be on the other end of that to serve as that quality control. And to, for your own sake, if you are using these things, you know what to look for, where it's like, ah, yeah, I got that thing right, but it got these things wrong, and so I need to point it at the thing it got wrong. So it's a very interesting world, and we're at an interesting inflection point with these things. But I do think that it's like who one thing that we're, I think, sort of describing here is that wherever the thing is coming from, whether it's from your own brain and your own hands, or whether it's from like another human, which is, this stuff is a team sport. So that's you are going to encounter and have to work with other people, or it's these machines, right? And AI tools kind of generating this stuff. Like that's that lens of is it good should help guide you into what to focus on. So with that coming all the way back to Jeff, you saying like, oh, you probably have a bunch of links and stuff like that. I think that like when we get into it, you know, understanding if we're talking about like front end web technology, knowing the foundations of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, good idea. Um, as far as like design goes, things like, Don't Make Me Think, which is like a very like old book, The
Yeah,
Design of Everyday
classic.
Things, like all these like kind of like classic things, but it's just like getting into, yeah, just the foundational qualities of what constitutes good design and good user experience. I think that those are the kind of like basement level foundational things that all these years later I'd still be pointing people to.
Yeah. And do you ever find that there's a temptation to want to broaden what your knowledge set is, as opposed to, to having a wide knowledge set as opposed to like a deep not knowledge set, because things are moving so fast that we feel like we have to cover more ground as opposed to getting deeper into something?
Yeah, I think
Like,
that there's a lot of room for both, and it's a very
yeah.
interesting thing. I think a lot of it has to do with, how you're wired as a person. Um, some people really like to specialize in things, and that you know talk about like T-shaped skill set, right? So
Yep.
like the top of the T is
Craig's
your
on it
breadth
right there.
versus your stem. And a lot of people, often have many areas of interest. And I think that that's a really good thing to lean into if that's what you find yourself gravitating towards, where it's some people are frustrated by that, but you can turn that frustration, or a lot of people, we've even gotten a couple questions, I think, here about like, oh, what do I specialize in? What road do I go down? And maybe the answer is multiple roads, and it's actually possible to do that. It's possible to sort of straddle the line if that's how you're wired and that's what you're into. But at the same time, I do think that having some depth is important, to eventually get there. Going too far in one direction or another can be, jack of all trades, master of none, right? Is you don't have depth in any of these things. Uh, don't raise your hand, Jeff. You got an idea. But then like people that are like, I do this thing. I have a good friend who was a Flash guy, and he
Yeah.
like well after, Steve Jobs put the
Killed it.
knife in the back of Flash or whatever, he was still kind of like hanging on to it. And of course, eventually he was able to like transition. But I do think that that sort of deep, specialty can it you can pigeonhole yourself, or get yourself into trouble if the landscape changes and all of a sudden the thing that you have latched onto as your thing, is no longer the thing that
Yeah.
people want or need.
And some of this is context too, right? In this particular question, it's like if you were a new student just starting out, so a lot of this is really tailored to foundations, you know. So as far as what would be useful for this person's students in future careers, those fundamentals. And it sounds like you are covering those things, HTML, CSS, even Bootstrap as an application. That's great. But now it's like providing these little pathways where people will get intrigued and say, where do I want to spend a focus on? Like, is typography really exciting me in this? Well, geez, we can learn about type within CSS. Or like, is layout a thing? There's a whole world around layout. Is it around, animations or shapes or anything else? There's all kinds of different pathways, but besides just saying HTML and CSS, well, within there's a whole vast like number of worlds that we could
It
create,
is true. I could
yeah,
like rattle off all of our friends that have built careers around sometimes very niche topics, but if
extremely.
that's the thing that you're enthusiastic about, but yeah, but getting started, I think that just kind of like really understanding the landscape, and I think that with AI specifically, this is I think a really important moment that is an existential, crisis for our field because a lot of what we pretend to do for work is to just write that HTML and handcraft that HTML or to
Yeah,
handcraft that design. And, the means of production are getting a heck of a lot faster. So it really does force us to reconsider what it is that we're doing. Like the how is still important, but at the same time, it's really an understanding the why, what's the why and the what. Is this good? Is this ethical? Is this accessible? Is this universal? Is this good? Is this sound? Right? And
yeah,
and I think that too many people for a long time have been focused. They're just head down, sweating the details of the production. And that's not to say that that's a bad thing, but it's like I don't. It's not the whole thing. It's not even the most important thing, right? So it really we're getting into kind of critical thinking territory versus just we are these rectangle producers.
that's great. Let's take a look at the next question. I think we
Yeah.
we 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 properly exhausted that. Like, hey, the fundamentals are great. Let's start there. So let's see. We have Yadiel here who's saying, "Hey Brad, I'm a software engineer and I'd love to get better at UI and UX design. Where do you recommend I start?" Hey, look, we're starting to notice a theme here. Where do I start? Are there any books or resources you think are essential, especially for understanding fundamentals? Oh my gosh, we're
Yeah.
talking a lot about fundamentals, which is,
Yeah.
obviously going to be a theme.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
look at
I
that! You have a link right away.
well, yeah. This was a talk I did a while ago, but as I was thinking about it, kind of covering like the T-shaped skill sets and all of that stuff, but also just kind of talking about I have a thing in here somewhere that is, there's an old phrase and it depends on who yeah, Henry Thomas Buckle, right? Great minds discuss
That's a great
ideas.
name.
Yeah, great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, small minds discuss people. And which is I like that. It's very good, right? We could spend our time like gossiping about, the other person or whatever, but we kind of want to dig deeper, right? And I think that that's kind of the spirit of both the first question as well as this other one, which is just like what are the deeper things. So I kind of like appropriated that. It was like small minds discuss tools, right? Which is the what do you think of this framework versus that framework or this new AI model that's blowing the old AI model out of the water and it's just like there's a market for it
Totally.
that'll get you some clicks, but at the same time it's like what we want to do is dig deeper, right? So have great minds discuss principles, average minds discuss technologies, small minds discuss tools. So
That's
there's my appropriation of that other phrase. But
uh,
how that relates, I think, to both the first question and this sort of other question as well, it's, what are those principles, right? What are the principles for good design? What are those principles of the web, right? And thankfully, I feel like the W3C, I think everyone could use a refresher
oh yeah,
on
where's that?
the design principles from the W3C. So it's worth stating. Um,
Yeah, where was that?
so let's see here. So there's a number of things. I'm going to drop a couple links in here. Um, so two friends of mine, Ben Brignell and Jeremy Keith. So there's some really good design principles. So they've kind of rounded up uh, and have these kind of meta resources of design principles, which are well worth looking at. Um, but let me see if I could see that. Yeah, the W3C. Yeah.
They just they just published like a list of principles, right?
Yeah. It's like
Like yeah.
maintainability, modularity, minimum redundancy, accessibility, independency, internationality, extensibility. These are like just beautiful. Like so when we get into it, both with this with both of these questions, right? Like what do we focus on? What are these these fundamentals? It kind of starts with these principles, I think, like more so than like any specific resources. But I think that just kind of perusing through these design principle resources by Ben and Jeremy are both really great resources, very inspirational. But it gets at the heart of I think what we're talking about, right? As the means of production are changing, it's really important to be, guided by these important principles, like what's coming out the other end, and do they adhere to these principles? So that's I think a real cornerstone of what it means to be a good designer and developer. There's a thing from Jared Spool from a while ago too that is kind of like what makes for a good design principle, and it's a very interesting thing because what he says is that does a design principle help you say no most of the time? And I love that. It's
Yeah.
basically like, yeah, here we go. I'm gonna share that article here. So he has this. So principles are important, and they're important because they help guide our decisions and our behavior and all of that, and they help us both in design and in life, right? Like this is
Yeah.
why it's important to have opinions and have principles and have things that you care about enough to say, I am this kind of person, so I'm going to behave in this way. And when
Yeah.
confronted with a situation where I can go either way, being guided by principles are really, really helpful and important and clarifying. So good in both the career world, but also just in life
Yeah.
in general. But like, I'll rattle off Jared's stuff because I think it's really good, which is basically like, does a principle emerge from research, or in other words, like, is this grounded in reality, or is this just some sort of like, platitude or just kind of, quip? The second test is, does it help you say no most of the time? And I really love that, which is just like, here is this thing, you know, AI generate me a website and it will do it, dutifully, right? But then it's like, well, is it good? Or like based on these principles, like, no, that it got that wrong, no, it got that wrong, no, it got that wrong. Or, our brand is, strong and direct, and that doesn't translate to, you know, soft border radius and pastel color palettes, for instance, right? So it's like having these kinds of principles in place and guidelines in place help people, including yourself, right, make better calls.
It,
Test three, does it distinguish your design from your competitors? This is another way of saying it's like, yes, there are some universal principles that apply to everybody, but I think
yeah,
that what Jared's picking at here is does this help you stand out, right? Is this uniquely yours, right? What are
yeah,
some things, what are some principles that are uniquely yours or your organization or your team? What are you doing specifically, right? That is different than what everybody else is doing. Most places do not contemplate that stuff
oh
at
no.
any meaningful level. We do a lot of looking over our shoulders at what everybody else is doing, and we're saying, well, they're doing it, so we're going to do it too.
Hence your blog title there. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Always looking over the shoulder. Did you catch there in the chat that Dennis shared the W3C design principles in there too? I just wanted to call that out specifically because
Read them.
what's
Yeah,
so
read them out. This is great.
well, there's so
Oh
many
yeah.
of them.
Oh, it's a big. This is a
Well,
big meaty
yeah,
one.
yeah, this is like a specification,
Yeah.
and but the reason I call it out is because the way it's broken down in the table of contents, you can see how these types of statements are guiding principles to more specific and more applicable types of like actions and that you can like practically do inside of there. And then from there, if you choose to go into a certain best practice or a principle, you can go even deeper and start talking about the small thinking stuff, like the tools that actually accomplish that thing, and you can get super nerdy about it. And
Yeah.
that's
Beautiful.
where your whole T shape comes in, right? You
Yeah.
start digging deeper.
Yeah.
But I love structure like that. I love tables of contents and stuff that show that literal breakdown right there.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, I shared another link that's actually more succinct, but this is from 1998 from Tim Berners-Lee. And it's just simplicity, modular design, being part of a modular design, tolerance, decentralization, test of independent invention, and principle of least power. Those last couple probably warrant a little bit of
I was gonna say
exploration, but I do think that it kind of coming back to the grain of the web, right? And what it is uniquely good at and is grounded in these really core principles. So yeah, principles matter a great deal. And then from there, having those principles in place at a personal level informs and influences, yeah, what books you're reading, who you're paying attention to, who you're not paying attention to. And I've found at a personal level that having strong principles um, has freed me from a lot of the FOMO feeling.
that's good.
Because there's just a lot. As we all know, there's just a lot out there. We are just inundated, oversaturated, and if you don't kind of have a strong foundation in place, you could easily get swept away by the strong current of just everything that's happening and everyone breathlessly saying, oh, you need to be paying attention to this, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing this. And what I found personally is that kind of having strong principles in place help guide me and be able to sort of let that stuff just kind of roll by my consciousness and me just say like, oh, that looks nice and I'm sure somebody's excited about that, but I'll be over here doing my thing. So
It's the whole missing the forest for the trees idiom, right?
how
Yeah.
so? Say more about that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, geez, like if we don't have the bigger picture of like foundations and principles down, you miss the overall point, and those are what are the guiding factors, the filters that we have that allow us to drill down deeper and provide us that pathway. And so but as we get deeper and deeper, you're getting more in the weeds. And so that's where, well, actually, in this case, you're getting more in the trees. And so if you get too close too fast and you start going down that or start drinking from that fire hose that Brad's talking about, yeah, it would be really easy to miss the bigger forest, the foundations, the principles, than the actual trees of the how to's, the tools, the very specific types of things. So yeah, I think of that idiom like right away. It would be so easy to miss the larger point
Yeah.
if we're already focused on the details.
Yeah.
Those details are what the noise is that we hear every day, and that's
Yeah.
honestly what we're not trying to talk a lot about here on this show, right? Is like, hey, this Figma plugin, let's talk about this specific thing. And it's like, no, we want to bubble up,
Yeah. Yeah.
and talk about, well, what's driving that
Yeah.
that decision in the first place.
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole forest for the trees, my friend.
Yeah, that's great. I think that this leads in quite nicely into the next question,
Mm.
which is they prefer to be anonymous for now, but that's okay. But they said, I've spent my career speaking about using my skills as a designer for good causes. I was laid off from a job I love in January 2023, and despite trying to stick to relevant domains where I felt tech could do the least harm, I soon realized how naive that mindset is. As the industry began to shift, I found myself disillusioned and unprepared. 2 years later, I ultimately ended up taking on a role with an AI powered marketing company. For me, marketing and AI often reflect the worst impulses of humanity and the very things that have set our country, our species, and our planet towards a troubling trajectory. I feel an immense guilt, but I am also thrilled to be able to continue to do what I love, designing, especially when many friends are still struggling to find work. I've yet to announce my role publicly, partly out of shame about working with
Oof.
AI and fear of potential layoffs. What advice could you offer a designer navigating a tech industry that does not reflect my values?
This is like so big, right? And I mean, it makes me immediately think of Miriam Suzanne's post, right? Tech continues to be political, because that was something that she is like was like openly grokking about, like, hey, I'm feeding a system that I'm not very happy about,
Yeah.
and this system is taking from me. Um, and and yeah, we have to be cognizant of the fact that this phenomenon is taking place. That sometimes you are not going to adhere to the principles. Here we go again. The principles of what you are working inside, and yeah, now you're in a situation where you have where you feel grateful that you have a job, I'm sure, but at the same time, you feel this almost survivor's guilt of like, well, I have a job, but it's really not what I should be doing. And it really conflicts with my personal values. And I'm not just ashamed of it, I feel guilty about it. Like that just is like the gut punch right there.
Yeah.
Brad, how do you deal with like a guilt like that? Because it's a conflict internally with that person, right?
Yeah, and and I think that they're in very good company. I think
Yeah.
that there's a phenomenon that I think is articulated here that I see play out in so many of my friends and loved ones, which is I think that the world is now smaller, right? Our media landscape has brought the ills of the world into our it just takes center stage and we're, cute puppy picture, reminder of macro level terror and awfulness, back to another cute puppy picture, here's a friend's wedding, and then yet another reminder. Like that's its own thing. But I think that like we are being confronted with and bombarded with the the state of the world, and I think that really well-meaning people are wired correctly and rightly. I think that like it's like I want to do good, right? And you're hearing that in the question, right? It's like I'm a designer. I know my responsibility, and I
Yeah.
want to apply that to really worthy and good things, which is incredible and incredibly noble. And I think that we could all do, with more of that attitude. Now, that said,
Agreed.
the world is a challenging and imperfect place, and you have to feed yourself and your
Yep.
family.
Yep.
And I think that there's really something here. And I'll share a story that is I'll allow myself to be vulnerable, I think, a little bit, but like I took on a project once upon a time with a fossil fuels company. I'm not to this day, it is something that I feel really uncomfortable with. It was a good gig. Everyone we worked with was great. The work was great. It was really exciting. We did good work. The backdrop of why I took that project on was for a similar reason that the person asking the question was. It was like, it was at a point in life where some things had gone down, and having any project was important. And I'm like, I have to take care of my family.
Yeah.
And I don't like, again, like I here, this is, a decade or more now, maybe about a decade ago. I have a hard time reconciling that. And so, you know, perhaps someone more principled than myself would be like, nope. And there's a very good chance that I would have found that, better job with Greenpeace or whatever instead.
Sure.
But at the same time, it's like the context matters. And I think that that's one of the things to it's difficult to have um principles that are so unmoving or unwavering, or that they lead to this friction between reality, right? Like we're all idealists to some degree, and some of us more than others, but a lot of idealists suffer because the principles are sort of like so unwavering. So I'm not suggesting like everyone you just go out and be fine, working with like fossil fuel industry or things that they fundamentally disagree with. But there does need to be some forgiveness, some self-forgiveness to say like, look,
Gosh,
your
yeah.
situation is like you're laid off, you have to eat, you have to take care of yourself and your family, and that's actually one of the best things you can do to help the world and continue your broader vision of using design for good. It's like this, is a moment in time, and to give yourself that forgiveness that it's there. That said, it's a high degree of self-awareness of what's going on there, which is really great, which is to say, this doesn't have to be your forever job, and it
No.
won't be, right? So it's like you are doing this is serving a purpose for
Purpose.
this moment, for this particular season in your life, and that you will undoubtedly be looking out your periphery vision for better opportunities that better align with your personal principles and values, and continue to do that. But in the meantime, find ways to find enthusiasm and excitement, and to, there are fertile opportunities in this world. And maybe you could take that gross application of AI pointed at the world of marketing, and instead, point it in another direction. There's a lot with AI and like the ethics and stuff around it, but it is a general purpose technology,
Hmm.
which is to say, you could point AI at marketing, or you could point it at recycling, or you could point it at, carbon capture or whatever the thing is, right? So all to say, this experience you're having right now, give yourself the permission and give yourself the forgiveness to just kind of understand that it's doing a job for you right now, and that it doesn't need to be your forever thing. You're not a terrible person because you took this job,
Totally not.
and that you could actually use this. This is a chapter in your life that you could then kind of take forward and apply to your bigger vision.
There's also a part of this too that I think is recognizing what you can do as an individual and what limitations you have as an individual. I, you are extremely self-aware in this, and like Brad said, that's great. At the same time, you are one person, and you probably aren't going to be able to solve the ills of whatever evils you have all by yourself. And and sometimes you do have to play in the system and feed it. But at the same time, I would also encourage you to think about small wins too, and
Yeah.
to think about, well, maybe if I can't turn the dial 100% of the way, how can I turn it 1%? How can I take it 2% or 3%? I always love this like idea of incremental change or incremental wins, because that is what gives you momentum. And even, we haven't talked about ADHD or anything like this, at some point, but little dopamine hits too are phenomenal for like saying like, ooh, I made a little inroad here.
Yeah.
So there are definitely ways that like you can work within the system and coexist with it and still get something out of it and make some meaningful change, even if that meaningfulness is to you internally, because at the end of the day, you're living with yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, like if you can just say, hey, I can have this amount of influence and control, that will help you be a lot more realistic with what you can and cannot do.
Yeah, and you saying that word control there is, I think, really important. And
Yeah.
I see Craig in the chat. He says, I feel guilty that AI and even one small data center needs 5 million gallons of water each day, which isn't good for the environment, especially when that water could be used to irrigate farm. Not happy about this in my core principles. And again, like this is something that we're all reckoning with right now. I'm reading a very, very good book right now. I'm almost done with it, called How Infrastructure Works.
Oh
And
gosh, that's a what is that?
I'm
A
gonna
thousand pages?
what's that?
What is that? 1,000 pages?
It's actually it's pretty amazing. And let me see if I can find it. Yeah, Deb Chakra. And it is phenomenal. And she is a professor. Here, I'm sharing it now.
Nice.
Really good book from both like a design systems perspective, but also just from what we're talking about here, because she talks a lot about how, systems are political, and how and everything that Craig, your sentiment is, which is just like, yeah, we have these dependencies, there's externalities to all of these systems, and so on and so forth. But I think that one thing is that's kind of a theme of that book, but also in general, and it's worth pointing this out. There's some historical precedent that I think plays into this kind of guilt and responsibility. So it's like the fact that an AI data center consumes all of this water, and it's like, yes, like we can uh opt not to use these AI tools, right? In the same
Yeah.
way that, yeah, beef and, grazing and stuff like that is one of like the biggest, contributors to greenhouse gases. And that if we cut down our beef, consumption, or get rid of it altogether, we're going to do that. And of course, we all know and can understand and appreciate that, oh yeah, it's everybody making all these decisions at an
Yes.
individual level that ultimately ladder up to this stuff.
Yes.
While that's true, there's a lot of precedent where things like reduce, reuse, and recycle, it's like that came from the like plastics manufacturing industry to as a way to abdicate their responsibility and basically put the burden on consumers to be recycling, rather than them taking responsibility
Yes.
for they're the point of production and actually have the means and the ability to do it. But of course it's more costly to address that. So rather than own it and address things at a system level, which have a vastly greater impact. They
Oh,
pass the
sure.
buck on to consumers and play into those psychological feelings of guilt. And it's like, oh crap. And so like this AI data center water consumption model is that same dynamic
Exactly.
where and this book does a very good job at that, where she's like, my decision to take a flight right across the country to visit my family, which is, a huge, uh, you know, releaser of carbon, right? She talks about like what that is in the broader pie chart of things, and it's like it's it's minuscule upon minuscule upon minuscule, and that's not to say that we don't have a personal responsibility. We do.
Yeah.
But so many of these things are these like system level, infrastructural levels that are bigger than anyone's
Yeah.
individual decision to use AI or not and whatever. And this is why politics is important. This is why like sort of like bigger system thinking and system change and systematic thinking really matters. Uh, and that's what makes it hard too,
Yeah.
because yeah, so I don't know. So there's that like personal responsibility, which we shouldn't lose. But there's
Yeah.
also that please I'd encourage everyone to take the weight of the world off your own personal shoulders. You are not
Good
in
call.
control of it. Your decision to work this job, not work this job, like that stuff matters. But like just know that the personal ills or like the macro level ills of the
Yeah.
world, these wicked problems that we're all wrestling with are not don't all fall on your shoulders. And you need to do
Yeah.
we all need to do the best we can. We need to work within the realities and the constraints of our lives, and we need to be sort of gentle and forgiving. Don't lose sight of those higher ideals and principles. Like, despite
Yeah.
me, taking a project that I, in retrospect, like I still struggle with and I'm conflicted about and, have some regrets about, like, I'm proud that that wasn't like game over, Brad. Like you're now like an evil villain, and this is what you do from now on, right? Like I think that's why again these principles, like that's why I think that's been such a theme in this conversation,
Yeah.
as it's just like we all can and should be continuing to improve, do our best, wherever we're at in the state of the world, the state of our lives, the state of whatever, like be grounded in these principles. Do your best in those moments. You're going to have better days, you're going to have worse
Yeah.
days, you're going to have days where, you know, you eat that cheeseburger and you feel guilty afterwards, but that doesn't stop you from eating a salad the next day or whatever.
Oh, that's absolutely true. And sometimes, if yeah, I mean, yeah, being mindful of like how much you actually have, control to a degree is going to be big here. But also realizing that not all conditions are going to be perfect all the time. That life is just messy in
It's
general.
never perfect. It's
It's
not
never
like that.
perfect.
That's the thing. And like it's such a thing that is, sorry to jump in, but it's like
No.
you landed on something that is a dynamic that I see play out again and again and again and again, usually through the lens of people again carrying that weight of the world on their shoulders and just like carrying it around with them. And don't get me wrong, the state of the world is pretty whew, we got some stuff going on, right? But, but all the more reason to find happiness and joy and unabashedly and without any semblance of guilt or any of that shit, like allow yourself to have that. Not as a little escape, not as like
Yeah.
a whatever. No, like show up big because there's never going to be a perfect moment where the world is just totally hunky dory and everybody's
Oh,
fine, and oh yeah, there's enough, like
it's messy.
your life situation is just like perfect, and all you're gonna do is just like hang around and do jigsaw puzzles. Like that's not how this works. So you have to own it. You have to find it and you have to claim it. And what I really like am so incredibly passionate about is to do that despite it all. Despite it all, you got to do it. You got to do it. You're if you're waiting for that moment to be happy or to do the thing or like you just have to do it now.
This is something I'm actively dealing with in parenting. If you indulge me for just a
Please,
second,
yeah.
where it's like my 12-year-old, she does not. She's very picky with the types of vitamins that she takes, and it just is. It's like you have to take your vitamins; they're good for you. We want to make sure that you're getting the right nutrients of things, right? Um, I don't like the texture of this particular um, vitamin. Okay, so what do? I go out and buy swallow one. So then she doesn't have to worry about texture. You just swallow it, right? Yeah, but these ones don't. They're too big. They're like hard to like swallow. Okay, let me go get you gummy ones because the texture you like a lot more. No, the flavor of this one isn't as good as the one that was like this. So here I am. I've gone out and bought three different types of vitamins all for the purpose of like the core principle, which is I just need you to be healthy.
Yeah.
And but her predilection towards perfection and having all the boxes checked is preventing her from being healthy. And at that point in time, we could align that with the whole read or with the question in terms of like, is this guilt? Well, don't let that guilt become paralyzing and keep you from doing
Yeah.
the things that keep you healthy and strong and keep you functioning at the same time. And realize that, just like Brad has been saying, cut yourself a lot of slack because there's only so much you can control within there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but don't let it turn you into a dysfunctional, or get you into a dysfunctional loop.
Yeah.
Take your vitamins, you
Take
know.
your vitamins. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's part, yeah, that's part of building, that's a very G-rated or very like lightweight way of it's like building some grit, right? Building some result. It's like, yeah, you
Yeah.
gotta eat your broccoli, gotta take your medicine. I know you don't like it, but like that's it, right? And I
Yeah.
think that that's a good life lesson to learn. And again, I sort of see this stuff like play out in like bigger ways where people are like, I won't even talk to you unless you meet this like checklist of my criteria of, or I won't vote for this candidate
Yeah.
or like there's one guy I know who just is like laser focused and just like trying to like just pick at every negative quality of everyone in I think that his life mission is to just help remind everybody that everything sucks and but it's like you see him and he's miserable, right? And it's like, yeah, there's no such thing as like the perfect political candidate, or there's no such thing as like the perfect like coalition. And like I think that like what's needed desperately in this moment is like more nuance, more tolerance, more understanding. And again, it all comes back to these like deeper principles where it's just like, hey, we want people to be healthy. Yeah, you good with that? You good with that?
Yeah.
I have this like fantasy that is just like I want every political conversation to start with that shared
Oh
human
gosh.
value,
Could you imagine
and
that?
then we could start to deviate from there. But it's like, but yeah, it's a recognition that the world is imperfect, we're imperfect, other people are imperfect, these systems are imperfect, the everything about existence is not ideal and it's never going to be, right? So what do you do with that, right? And I think that that's like the source of a lot of suffering is that people, you know, usually grounded in really good and noble and idealistic sort of things, which are great, and we shouldn't lose those. But I think that like we do have to square that circle, or reconcile the very real differences between our ideals and existence.
My mind is going straight to Seinfeld episodes where it's like where it's like every there's something wrong with every person. You have man hands. You're a close talker. You got a puffy shirt. You like the cinnamon babka. All these different types of like what's wrong and what's preventing me from actually experiencing joy in something.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's worth taking off those goggles from time to time and remembering that there's also good qualities in things. Even in an AI job, I'm sure you can walk away with something
Yeah.
that's like positive
That's
out of it.
that's that's exactly it. And it's like the one thing that I will say, like just kind of coming back to their question,
Yeah.
there's a few things that I think are worth pointing out and sort of like picking at. And I know that we're spending a lot of time like on this one, but I think that it's a
It's a
good
good
one
one.
because it's very um you know the industry began to shift. I found myself disillusioned and unprepared. And that it's also for me, marketing and AI often reflect the worst impulses of humanity and the very things that have set our country, our species, and our planet on a troubling trajectory, and that they feel an immense guilt about that. And so I think that there's like a couple of things in there, which is one, check your assumptions.
Mm,
And that's not to
yeah.
say, and I'm not here to convince anybody that AI and marketing is like, a dream job and is going to cure cancer or whatever. But at the same time, like I think that when you take that things as a given, right? Uh, and you're like, well, this is awful, and now I'm just participating in this awfulness, right? There usually those things aren't so cut and dry and aren't so black and white. And kind of coming back to my work with
Yeah.
fossil fuels company, when we got into it, and I was like, oh, half of this software is around safety of existing infrastructure and like stuff that is currently being managed through an Excel spreadsheet, which is very scary.
Just,
And they're like, we're
gosh.
building apps to monitor the health so that there isn't a spill or whatever. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that doesn't seem all that bad. And of course, while they're a fossil fuel company, they're more an energy company. And so some of the other projects were more around their sustainable and green stuff. So, all to say, again,
Yeah.
like this good, bad, black, white, binary, right? Kind of stuff is not so cut and dry, everyone. So it's just like,
No.
so it's really about, you know, like you can take that as a given and say, yeah, like I feel like this reflects the worst impulses of our humanity and is doing nothing but harm. Well, here you are, your principled self. Maybe you inject, your better nature and remind everybody and find opportunities to have it not be such an evil thing or whatever. So all to say is like there's a lot of gray, there's a lot of hard
Huh.
stuff, and I'm not saying like don't just be cool with it, but don't just take things as a given and sort of paint things as like this is just inherently evil and I just have to like, plug my nose and suck it up and do it. Lean into the nuances of things. I think that's been such like a theme in a lot of the conversations I've had recently. Is just like we have to get better at nuance. We have to.
Yeah. Yeah, when we're treating things as black and white, it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point in time, right? It's like this is evil. This is going to be a bummer of a job. Well, you're going to feel like it's an
Guess
evil
what?
job.
It's
That's a
going to
bummer.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, and again, that's not to like put lipstick on a pig or something, and say, hey, look, it's pretty now. It's like,
Yep.
but there are pretty aspects to it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And even if the prettiest aspect is, hey, it's putting food on my table and it's paying my
Yes.
bills, you have
Yes.
to accept that and say that's good.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you don't need to be delusional. You can be eyes wide open with it. And again, just it's kind of getting a little bit more comfortable with that. I know I know that this isn't ideal, but here I am and I know what this is doing. And in the meantime, I will continue searching elsewhere. So um I know so one of the things we wanted to do um we kind of we're still figuring out this format, but I think that we've got like 20 minutes left. And I think what we wanted to do was kind of open it up to everyone that's here if they want to either kind of like weigh in and build on what we've said, or if you have like a question or you want to sort of talk about something that either resonated with you, or if you want to call bullshit on anything that we said or whatever, or just but
Cha-ching.
but yeah, so I think that what we want to do is kind of open it up on open up to the people that are
Get it?
been kind enough to join. So if you want to chime in, feel free to just use the reaction, just sort of raise your hand, and we'll call on people.
So we can open that up. If there isn't much that comes in, we still have plenty of questions that we can
Oh, sure.
pour
Yeah.
through too.
But I feel like
Um,
this is a good time, I think, to
yeah,
to sort of like lean on it. And there's been a lot of people in the chat. So even if you've kind of commented on the chat, but if you want to like kind of uh say it aloud. This is
yeah.
you know, and no pressure either, but please.
And I was really digging this one comment in the chat from Michael over here, talking about GAMO or GAMO, whatever. Grateful about missing out. Did you
Yeah.
see that? So much. There's so much churn around there when something new and shiny comes out. I think you risk
Yeah.
burnout if you go after everything immediately. Um, that's a really good one too. So even comments like that, feel free to like share those with us.
Mike is Mike, are you there? Mike's like one of my best friends, so I'm so glad he's here. Mike taught me so much about web design and development, and we got a chance to collaborate many years ago, like all the way back in like 2008. So
Uh,
we've stayed in touch ever since.
how did that come to you? Like what was the hook that like you're like this is it? Was Mike showing you something that like it just latched onto you and you're like this is my like aha moment?
Yeah, Mike, are you still on? And because if you're here, yeah, jump on, Mike. Don't be shy.
There he is.
There he is. All right, and Amanda, can we unmute? Oh wait, ask to unmute. There we go. Okay, cool.
I think we're just both young and stupid, so that kind of made it work. I think
But
if for me, I could talk to just everybody kind of knows how positive Brad is, so he just had this energy that was kind of really fun to work with and play off of, and just through the years. We've kind of always looked for opportunities to work together just to kind of recapture that. But, it's hard to, get back, what was that, 17 years ago? I don't even want to do the math.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a different time.
it really was. And so Mike, you were actually the Flash person I was
I
referring.
know, I know, I know.
Oh no, he knew it.
I just outed you. But like in that moment in time, so the context was you were working for a small agency, like a fashion. It was an agency focused on like fashion e-commerce
Ecom,
websites.
yeah. That's kind of
Right.
the start of ecom kind of blowing up.
Yeah. And so Mike was like in Flash land and like building these incredibly complex things, like build your own pearl bracelet with like little
That was fun.
charms and all of that stuff, and it was all like data driven and whatever. And then I was like more the person outside of the Flash world, and so we'd have to kind of like figure out how to make all of this stuff like work together. And so yeah, so that it really was this really fun time in the industry that I feel with the death of Flash, we have lost a lot of that. Really, we've lost some of it. It's
I
still
think it was
there.
lost temporarily. I think it's all achievable now with
Yes.
HTML.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there was a little
Yeah.
bit of a kind of an overlap where you couldn't do everything you wanted to.
Yep.
Um,
But it was
yeah,
like
I mean, a
with
piece of it.
Flash, it was like a blank canvas, right? And so like the opportunities, it was like it'd be cool if we could do this. And I think that now it's like, yeah, it's like here's your grid system, here's like your component library, and like a lot of that stuff is there. And so I feel it's like less like a technology and more like a mindset of like people would come to Mike and be like, we need to make this crazy thing, this immersive world, or this like highly customizable thing. And because like Flash was this
Yeah, the answer
like
was always yes.
yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
and
Oh gosh, I
and,
remember those days.
and I
Absolutely.
think for a minute there the answer was maybe, and now but I think the answer is yes again.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, but I mean the thing about that time, it was pre-remote work. I kind of, you know, obviously I worked from home a lot. You were at the office a lot, but that's something every developer that I've managed, I always, I say there's something invaluable about, you know, going into an office and working and collaborating in person and
Yeah.
taking a peek at
Yep.
someone's monitor and say, what are you working on? Or like,
Yes.
there's something that's a generational thing, and I can see both sides of the argument, but it's kind of like, you don't miss what you don't know.
Yeah.
Um, not that that's what I'm trying to turn here, but like,
Yeah.
I miss that kind of collaboration. You can do it online, you can do it with Slack, you could do it with meetings, but it'll never
Yeah.
be. It's never a one to one.
Yeah.
It's like the old water cooler, right? People used to be able to get around that. That was a literal thing.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
it's like Mike, our relationship, I think, is case in point too, how important that is. It's like we could have worked remotely and has like sort of stayed in touch, and I've definitely worked with many other people in that capacity. I think a lot of it had to do with, yeah, 17 years ago, we're at a certain time in our life, but like the fact that we did
yeah,
have the opportunity to collaborate so closely and also go grab a beer and a meal afterwards has allowed us to have a friendship for 17
yeah.
years. So like that real kind of, yeah, like
There's
synchronous in-person connection really can sustain a relationship through time and space.
Yeah, it's again, like you said, it's kind of the time of life where we were at. But it's just that ability to, brothers in arms, kind of in the ditches.
Yeah.
Uh, there's kind of a lost art of like going out. The work teams that I had like right after college, and then those years after, that was like kind of my second kind of realm of lines in the sand of jobs that I had. Those, I still talk to those guys, you know, and I can't say that for like the last job I had, you
Yeah.
know. Again, it's a time of life thing. It's kind of, I got kids now, so that takes focus, but there's something palpable and intangible at the same time about those kind of environments. And AI is, you know, it's amazing. I'm of the camp where I've kind of chimed in here, but like it's a tool in a toolbox right now. I don't want AI orange juice just yet. Let's just kind of pause for a minute and learn how to use it to your skill sets. Still learn the fundamentals like you guys talked about. Um,
Yeah. I think that there's something there where that you're picking at, which is like the industry has grown up in certain ways, but it's like when we think about our work, Mike, it's like we didn't have Jira tickets. I wasn't assigning you. I wasn't like and I think that like a lot of collaboration, this is my experience working with a whole bunch of teams, is that a lot of that, like you said, Mike, that brothers in arms or that just like really close collaboration where it's like you're jamming on stuff together. So that happens so rarely that that's like one of the things that I help teams do. I'm like, hey, check
Yeah.
this out. We could actually just get on jump in together. We have to do it virtually or whatever nowadays. But like, yeah, back in the day, we just, yeah, sit side by side and we just be like working together. And in that hour, right, we would solve a
yeah,
bunch of
you
problems
can't,
and then we go away and do other things and that was it, right? And that's
you
gone now
can,
because it's all like hyper structured and like, well, is that a P0? Is that a P1? Or like how many story points is that? And
yeah,
like,
Mark didn't care about, Mark didn't add structure to that job.
no, no, no,
Let's call him out in
yeah.
all of his glory and remembering him.
Poor guy.
But yeah, you can't really. You can reminisce. There's a difference, I guess, in my mindset. I can reminisce about those days, and I can see the value and kind of uh, feel not bad, but feel we'll use that word for this generation who just won't know it.
Yeah.
You can reminisce, but you can't really mourn it in the sense where you wish it would go back that way because I don't. What you just mentioned is so invaluable. Oh, I can work with this team instantly. We could hop on. We're in different
Yep.
cities. We
Yeah.
collaborate.
Yep.
But the old like looking at someone's screens, like, what are you working on? That's so cool. You know,
Yeah.
or help me, what's going on with this bug right here? Those things have evolved to be more remote, but there's just something about it that, I guess things took longer back then too, you know?
Yeah.
You can extend that to the client process too. I used to have a lot of joy just going into a client's, like actual office and sitting right next to them and presenting something and saying like, "Hey, this is what I came up with. I'm going to explain the heart to you, and it's not over, boxes
Yeah.
in a browser where we're all just talking heads." There's
Having the
something about
designer right
yeah.
behind you.
Yeah, exactly right. Commenting on this stuff and like getting it straight from the horse's mouth. And there was, that like personal touch to it. We don't have that same level of collaboration even with the people that we're working with and for.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you think that's
It's still there.
affected
It's
do you think
still
that's
there.
affected the output though? Like you were mentioning, like design systems and things looking all the same, and you feel like there's a level of organic design, or is it still,
Um,
does it still exist?
um, I focus a lot less on that and more on the sense that I just felt that there was this like camaraderie with my client as if we were almost coworkers in a sense. And it's
Yeah,
like
versus enemies.
yeah, because now it's in us and them, type
Yeah,
thing where it's like,
I get
we're
you.
all yeah. Whereas before I felt like, hey, guess what? I created something awesome for you. I can't wait to show it to you. We're gonna, and then we'll pick it apart together. I'll make iterations on it right there in front of you, and then we'll
But that's
call
not
it a
what the
day.
Figma file looks like.
No,
What the client signed off on.
it's
I
exactly
could,
right.
I
I
still
could,
get in trouble for doing that. I get in trouble for
yeah,
adding something. They're like, that's not what we designed. I'm
yeah,
like, all right,
That
I'll
wasn't in the
remove it.
mock-up.
yeah.
What were you?
There absolutely is a lot lost and it has less to do even about those synchronous working sessions and more about the meal afterwards whenever you're in town or you're kicking off a project and you're all able to sort of go out, you know, have a drink, or not, or whatever, but just like share a meal and you get to know people at a more human
Yeah,
level.
you're
And
talking about other things other than work.
that's it. And but it's like it's through all of that stuff. And this is, I think, like one of the things kind of bringing it all the way back to the beginning where it's just like, oh yeah, focusing on the fundamentals. But Jeff, you mentioned it's like, oh yeah, like kind of going outside of that. Like I care a lot to learn from clients that I'm like, oh, you're
Yes.
into jujitsu, or
Yes.
you're into woodworking, or you're into this, that, or the other. That's all stuff that we don't think is relevant to the work, and it absolutely positively is. And there is something lost whenever it's just like, here's the thing, here's the objective, and what's like the process to get to the end of it. Like I think that if you're able to weave the needle point in jujitsu into the process, the actual work benefits from it. And like it's difficult to articulate that, and I can't say like, here's an example where the person that's into crocheting like made this better product, but like it is an instinct and I know it to be true. So well, thanks, Mike. This is great. We got a couple minutes left. Anybody else want to jump into the fray and join the party?
I have a question if someone else doesn't mind.
Go for it.
You know,
Yeah, go
as
for it.
Yeah.
it kind of goes back to, I guess, more the foundation of what you guys were talking about. You know, as a veteran, you know, and having come up doing things the way I did them, and then learning new things and kind of just stacking and stacking and stacking. You know, you look at browser uh, capabilities now, and you know,
Yeah.
just more specifically around CSS and stuff like that. I guess the general question is, with all these new features and ways to manipulate the DOM through CSS, where do you find, or where is an appropriate balance of, like, you know, the old tried and true stuff that still works and the new stuff that still works? Like where is the level of imposter syndrome come in when with regards to not using like the not selector, or you know whatever. Everybody uses
Yeah.
Flex now, but for a while, you know, Flex was an example, you know, that kind of, you know, will go back 5 6 years where they're like, oh, this other way works, I don't need Flex, you know. But now, you know, I think Flex is instinctual. So there's that evolution that happens. But like, you know, as it advances and gets really sophisticated, where how do you kind of compartmentalize that imposter syndrome with some of this new tech and everything?
Jeff, you take this one. You're
Oh
CSS.
man. Okay, sure. Oh yeah, it's all easy. No, I think that best practices catch up with standards over time, and as new features are released, we find practical applications of them, and sometimes those aren't immediate, and those things come out of other people's learnings, right? And those are people who are blogging and sharing, like, hey, check out this like cool thing that like I learned I could do with this, and then that gives you like a tool to use in a project somewhere. I really like, I believe it was Andy Bell who just recently published over at Piccalilli the whole, if it works, it's great. Like
That's
if
yeah.
it works, the web is backwards compatible. If it works, it's going to work. Just, but are you breaking any of the core, principles of things? Is it accessible? Is it usable? Is it perceivable? Is it, robust? All these things. And that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. It doesn't matter what implementation you use. That's, for what it's worth, it's my favorite thing about CSS. It's very poetic. You can say the same thing many different ways. There
Yeah.
isn't just one way to say red. There
Yeah.
isn't just like one way to say background color. You could do things in different ways, and they all work. Just because someone says this one way is more superior because it's less of a performance hit or something, that's fine. But maybe
Yeah.
that's not. But maybe that's not the priority for you at that moment. So
You
yeah,
just
I find that there is this like imposter syndrome though. But remember, if it works, it's still great.
I see like we're in we are like going through with CSS specifically. We are we beat the game, and everything else is like we're just going back through and doing like the side quest. Like so with like Flexbox and Grid, like I feel like we like achieved this level of this is now mature. Like we now have like the appropriate things. We're not like hacking this stuff together. And I feel like everything that's come out afterwards is either just more elegant ways to do the same thing.
Yep.
So it's like you get these kind of like nice little bonus features. Like logical properties is a great example of that, where
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay, you could just like write it this way and save yourself a bunch of, you can accomplish it different ways, but it's like it's just faster and more elegant.
Yeah.
Takes a little time to learn, but eventually you get it. So it's like there's that, and then there's just like brand new things that you could do, but like I mean, we've all suffered long enough in our careers where it's just like all of this stuff. I feel like it's all like just the sprinkles and the cherries and all the other fun stuff you could
Yeah.
put on top of the sundae now. It's like, this is
Yeah.
awesome. Like, oh, you could do this now, but it's like at least I'm not like hacking the crap out of my stuff just to get it to work.
Totally. A lot of it is syntactic sugar too, right?
Yeah.
Some of it, like I think that the latest proposal for supporting masonry in CSS by combining forces with grid and flexbox is like a perfect example of that. They're calling this idea item flow, as opposed to just going with like a grid solution or a flexbox solution. And it's like, well, it's just the language becoming more mature and more elegant over time, and it's just giving us that like extra affordance to do something a little easier than we did it before. And because of that, it opens up new possibilities that maybe we didn't have before as well. Like, and in this case, we're talking about line wrapping within grid and stuff like that. So yeah, we I totally get that, because I don't fully, grok the whole concept of item flow. And there's this, it's like part of me, it's like, crap, I work at a place like Smashing Magazine and CSS Tricks. I should know all this crap right off the bat, like, oh my, no, I don't, like, I'm learning just like everyone else. And I just happen to be learning in the open where I write that stuff up. And sometimes I get it and sometimes I don't. But I say that just to acknowledge the fact that I live with that imposter syndrome too, often, because
No, we all do.
yeah, we
I
all
think
do.
I think
Yeah.
if you don't have it, there's maybe a little, maybe you're lying to yourself a little bit. I think it's healthy to have it. I think it's healthy. I think it's human.
It is human, and there is always that temptation, just like Brad was talking about earlier in the show, like, hey, we're looking over our shoulders. We're trying to see, trying to get affirmation that the way we're doing things isn't bad. But just because someone else is doing something one way doesn't make your approach wrong. It just means you have a different way of looking at it, and that's just as expressive and valuable too. you know
Um, that was the ulterior motive to my question. Thanks, Jeff.
I love it. Well, look at that. That takes us right at time.
Yeah,
So yeah.
fantastic. Well, so yeah, so this is our second episode, and again we're trying to get through different questions, but these themes are emerging and stuff, and some things are worth picking at that hopefully apply to other people's situations, whether they're writing in or not. So if you're here, we hope that's the case. We would love to hear from you. About what you think about this. We are, again, kind of MVP iterating our way over this
Yeah.
thing. So any sort of suggestions or constructive criticism is welcome. We're pretty thick-skinned by this point in time. But and then I think that one of the other things that we're going to be doing as we do additional episodes is to bring different people in, including people who are like licensed therapists or people who have like backgrounds in psychology or like life coach kind of people and like other kind of people who aren't just going to talk about CSS like us. So, but so
I'd be
anyway, so
happy to
yeah,
do
so
that.
that's something that we're going to be kind of, I think, weaving in here in kind of future episodes. Jeff and I also we recorded a theme song for the show, so
That's
we could
right.
we we'll make that happen too, and sort of show that off. But yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, if you would like to share your question or situation with us to banter about on the show, please don't hesitate to reach out on the website. We have a form. You could ask it anonymously. Hopefully, you get a sense if you've listened to this episode, just kind of what we're doing, or kind of, you can serve it up and we'll spike it down. So, but yeah, but to everyone who has listened in and shared, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is I hope a worthwhile conversation. That's why we're doing it.
Thank you
So,
for listening.
all
Open
right.
up.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for joining.